Hey everyone. Now that we've completed a playthrough of Killer7, and now that you've seen, the whole game, basically, you've seen the twists and turns that the plot and the characters take, even if we may not understand all of them, why don't we start taking a look through Hand and Killer7? Up to now, we've only done a few of the readings, a few of the articles of the book that really didn't have any spoilers or anything. What we're going to start taking a look at now are the character profiles in Hand and Killer7. So this is separated out, I think, into sort of major characters that appear in every chapter across the whole game, and then characters more like minor characters that appear in individual chapters. So what we'll start taking a look at right now are the major characters. And we're going to start off by taking a look at the King of Smith, Harmon Smith. There's a certain level of translation from Japanese to English that hits me just right as we take a look at the King of Smith here. It's a very good illustration. I really like this illustration from the book. You can see it's pages 12 and 13 of Hand and Killer7. This 2-page spread talking about the King of Smith. There's some text on the page in Japanese. I cannot read them, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at the English text from the Hand and Killer7 translation that I've been using throughout this entire LP from Delta Head Translation, and I assume that this text will match up with what's on the page. I don't know that for sure. All I can say is that this is what the translation says. It says that Harmon Smith was born in New Southampton, Wineport. Harmon Smith is of Irish descent. He is 60 years old and handicapped. About that 60 years old part, that doesn't really reflect what his birth date is. There's a section of Hand and Killer7, which is a timeline of the events of the game, as well as before and after it, and it will say exactly when Harmon Smith was born, and even if physically he might be 60 years old, in reality, he might be a little bit older than that. So keep in mind that there is a timeline that we're going to be going through at some point that might contradict some of the information we see here, like Harmon being 60 years old. Now, he is the Delta Head's firstborn son. We have not heard that name before. Who are the Delta Heads? Well, Harmon Smith, the last name Smith, as you might have guessed, not exactly their real last name. Each of the Killer7 have the last name Smith. But in some cases, like, say, Coyote, you might guess that's not her real last name. In the case of Garcia Smith, that's not his real first name either. He was Amir Parkriner. In the case of Harmon Smith, Smith is not his original last name. His name used to be Harmon Delta Head. That was his birth name. Again, this is some information we'll see in the timeline, but at some point, when he became the King of Smith, he became Harmon Smith. Now, Harmon is the leader of the world's most powerful group of assassins, the Killer7. We know that. We understand that from playing the game. This is no surprise to us, even though the Killer7 frequently had trouble assassinating their targets, like, say, Fukushima, who got killed by someone else, or Trevor Pearl Harbor, who got killed by someone else. Regardless, the Killer7 were feared, mostly because of their ability to kill Heaven Smiles. Now, because of Harmon's power, he is known as the God Killer. What god are they talking about? Well, talking specifically about Kun Lan, who is referred to as God by some people. We know that the scientists, those scientists just in general, who follow Kun Lan, believe him to be God. So Kun Lan's nemesis, his opposite number, Harmon Smith, is the God Killer. Harmon is the origin of the multiple personae. Yeah, so that seems to be the case, that Harmon Smith, or some version of Harmon Smith, because there's more than one, is the person from whom this whole multiple personality thing came from. The multifoliate personae phenomenon came from one man, that being Harmon Smith. In his 20s, he worked as an agent for the Jim Townshend Survey Company. He has been an assassin ever since. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Jim Townshend or Townsend. Looking at the Killer7 wiki, it was Townsend, but the translation on Delta Head does say Townshend, so I don't know which one it's supposed to be. Either way, Harmon was supposed to work for them, and no, it doesn't seem to have been a real company. I looked it up, didn't find anything, so I'm pretty sure that's just fictional. His weapon is an armor-piercing rifle. We know that. We can see that in the illustration. He's better than Kun Lan at chess. Well, we don't really know too much about that, but Harmon did say at the beginning that Kun Lan isn't a very good player, even though it did seem at some point that Kun Lan did say that he had Harmon in check, though Harmon did respond in kind. In 2000, he was nearly killed by Dan Smith. The manual of the game did say something about how Dan Smith hates Harmon Smith, and in 2000, Dan nearly killed Harmon. Now, it kind of brings up an odd question of, in the course of the game, we never actually see Dan as a separate person from Harmon Smith, nor do we see any of the Killer7 as a separate person from Harmon Smith, aside from Garcian. So how did Dan try to kill Harmon? Was Dan a personae at that time, or was he his own separate person? You know, there's question marks here and there that we're not sure about. All we know is that in 2000, he was nearly killed by Dan Smith, and that is actually what has put Harmon Smith in that wheelchair. In 2010, he was resuscitated, so sometimes Garcian cannot resurrect people immediately. In the case of Harmon, he was so damaged that it took Garcian 10 years to resuscitate him. And according to the timeline, that is when Angel occurs. Apparently, Angel was Harmon's first job back after being resuscitated. And Harmon Smith is tied intimately to Coburn Elementary School. Yes, we did see Harmon's picture as one of the principals of Coburn. So, you know, the elementary school that George Washington was the principal of, and that the primary of the very first presidential election took place in, Harmon was at some point the principal of that school. You can see Harmon as being an educator. Sure, I can see that. Probably brought his gun with him to school as well. Just had it with him all the time. Next, we're going on to Kun Lan, Catastrophe from East. Kun Lan's illustration, not nearly as impressive as Harmon Smith's. Kun Lan just stands there in front of a cross, very plain. He doesn't need to impress us, I guess. What does his text say? Well, the translation says that Kun Lan is half Tibetan and half Chinese. His age is unknown. Now, I should mention that according to the timeline, his age is known in that he was born on the same year as Harmon Smith, which we'll find out what that is when we review the timeline. Half Tibetan and half Chinese. Kun Lan doesn't really have he doesn't hail from any one specific country. It's more like he represents the Asian world, more like. He's the son of a governor. All right. He is an incarnation of the demon, Marapapima. And, you know, that's kind of some specific info that we never learn in the game. Marapapima apparently is sort of like I guess, the Buddhist version of Satan, if you want, if that's a comparison you want to make, where Marapapima tries to stop people from achieving true enlightenment through offering them pleasures, earthly pleasures, let's say. You know, it's like the whole thing about achieving divine enlightenment versus being a slave to your earthly desires. Marapapima is supposed to represent the earthly desires. And you can tell that Kun Lan is all about those earthly desires. You can tell that. That aspect I don't think really comes across in the game. It's more like an East versus West thing, not an earthly desire versus divine enlightenment thing. So I don't think that aspect really gets across, at least from what little I know about Marapapima. But if he is an incarnation of a demon, well, it does explain why it says his age is unknown, since even if when he was born as a human, maybe he existed before that. He became the leader of underground societies at the age of 3. So, I mean, you might wonder why were underground societies taking him seriously as a leader when he was 3, when he was 3 years old. As you'll find out in the timeline, he was born a fully grown adult. My condolences to his mother. But that is apparently the case. So he became the leader of underground societies at the age of 3. I don't know what these underground societies were doing, but he was leading them, and his power has made him known as God's hand. So we heard about that he has his glowing right hand, known as the Hand of God, and he uses that to create heaven smiles. He can do it for other things as well, like when he touched Matsuoka and basically gave him the willpower and the focus to be the leader of the Japanese people in their fight against the West. So he can do a bunch of things with that hand of his. He can also catch bullets. You've seen him do that a couple times. He studied at a prestigious American university. We don't know what it is, but we do know that Kunlan has been educated at only the best American universities. We don't know what it is, though, or what he studied. What was his major? What did Kunlan minor in, do you think? You think Kunlan was part of a frat? Which frat do you think he would have been in? You think Kunlan played beer pong? I don't know. Questions we don't have the answers to. We do know that he lost his Tibetan citizenship when he was 24 years old. Doesn't say why. Doesn't say what happened to cause him to lose that citizenship, but he lost it. Using fake passports, he has moved through underground organizations all over the world. I like the idea that Kunlan needs to travel on, I guess, airplanes like everyone else. I kind of figured he just teleported. Like, if he wanted to be at a place, he would just appear at that place. I guess that's not what happens. He has to, take transportation, just like the rest of us. Drive cars, ride on buses. I would say planes, but they did say that they canceled all air travel when world peace was announced. So maybe he, rides on boats. I don't know. But apparently he cannot just go wherever he wants. He needs to use transportation, and he needs to make fake passports, since I guess you can't just put down that you're an incarnation of a demon on your real passport. They frown on that. You have to make up a different identity. In the past, he worked as a taxi cab driver in Japan. I want more information on that. I want to know more about Kunlan's past working as a cab driver. I want to see a flashback of Kunlan on hard times trying to get by working as a taxi driver. I want a chapter about that part of Kunlan's life. Now, was this before or after he started creating Heaven Smiles, the infinite army of invisible suicide bombers that he created to take down the Western world? Was he working as a cab driver at that time, or was he done with that by then? Doesn't say. I need this information, though. His objective is the destruction of nations, using billions of Heaven Smiles. Yep, we know. Specifically, the U.S. He wants to take down the status quo. He wants to take down Western power and replace it with Eastern. That's sort of the whole thing. That's his whole goal. That's like the whole chess game between him and Harmon. That's what the whole thing is about. East versus West. Who's going to win the chess game? Kunlan is Harmon's most distant neighbor, closest observer, most sympathetic companion, and target. Yes, Harmon and Kunlan have the whole friends and also enemies thing going on. They're mortal enemies, but they're playing chess, and they're joking with each other. That's their whole thing. They also get shot together by an automatic weapon, which, again, we still do not see who was holding that weapon. But I believe that's it for Kunlan's page. After that, we go on to Garcia Smith, a man who killed the past. And it is true, Garcia Smith did kill the past, and when he did so, he stopped being Garcia Smith. The person that was Garcia Smith then became no more. He then became Amir Park Reiner. Garcia Smith was born in Miami, near the border with Mexico. He is 33 years old. So, the information on Amir Park Reiner said he was from Alabama. I don't know. Look, I don't know. That's what it said. 33 years old. I did ask previously, how old do you think Garcian is? I was pegging him at maybe late 30s. Looks like he's younger than that. He's 33. Which does bring up a question of when he was talking with Mills, and Mills started to say that 30 years ago, you and Harmon, then he got shot. So whatever he did with Harmon, that would have put him at the age of 3. But, I mean, in this game, in this storyline, how much does age mean, really? At the age of 3, Kun Lan was leading underground societies, so I guess it doesn't really mean too much. His nickname is Garcia. I mean, really only Mills calls him this. I can't imagine anyone else calling him that. I can't imagine Harmon Smith calling him Garcia. Really only Mills is allowed to do this. He could see Heaven Smiles using his powers of clairvoyance. I mean, we've seen him see Heaven Smiles using the power of his vision ring. What is the vision ring? How did he see Heaven Smiles with it? Why did he have to put it down on that computer to log in as Amir Parkreiner to unlock the school gymnasium? You know, we never really find out what those rings are. It's kind of a mystery what the rings are about. I don't think there's anything in Hand and Killer 7 that talks about the rings, which is odd because they kind of stand out as something that there really is no in-game explanation for. His weapon is a handgun with a silencer attached. Yep, we've seen that plenty of times. He's not good at fighting, he's the weakest in battle, and it's true. I mean, if you're just shooting normal Heaven Smiles in the critical point, then he's fine. The problem is that 1, he doesn't learn any special attacks, and 2, if you have to fight special Heaven Smiles, like the Protectors, there's nothing Garcian can do with them. He can't fight them at all, so it is a problem if you're forced into a situation where you have to use Garcian, but you're going to have to go through some Protector Smiles because Garcian cannot fight them at all. After recovering a body, he has to tap on the button of the controller rapidly. So it's saying that Garcian has to tap on the button of the controller. I mean, it's the player, it's me who's tapping on the button, and I assume that Garcian is doing something else in the game, but no, apparently in the game, apparently quite literally, Garcian is tapping on a GameCube controller to bring someone back to life. So I guess that's what's actually happening when you are resurrecting someone. I guess Garcian actually has like a GameCube attached to that TV, and he's tapping on the button to bring the person back to life. Because it doesn't say that the player is tapping on that button, it says Garcian is. He was killed by Harmon in the past. Yeah, we don't actually know anything about this. We don't know what exactly happened to Amir to turn him into Garcian. We know that after killing the Smiths in the hotel, it looked like he shot himself on the roof of the hotel, and according to young Harmon Smith, he recovered Amir on the roof. But it says that he was killed by Harmon in the past here, so was he talking about killing him in another time? Maybe, because as we've seen, people in Killer 7, there are a few of them that have died more than once. Some of them died a few times. Presently, he is Harmon's faithful servant. We know about that. That's pretty much the entire game. Garcian is a sweet man who would not hurt a fly. I like that they threw that in there. Garcian is a feared assassin, but he wouldn't hurt a fly. That's why he's a cleaner. That's why he has to send out the other personae to do the fighting, because Garcian really doesn't like violence himself, is the thing. He's the most important personality in the story. It's true. Garcian is the one who kills the past in this story about killing the past. Really, it turns out to be not a story about Harmon Smith, not a story about the Killer 7. Rather, this has been Amir Parkreiner's story. He is the third eye. Yep, we know that he does have a third eye, even if it might be closed while he is Garcia Smith. The golden gun rightfully belongs to him. Yeah, how did Greg Nightmare get that? We don't know where the golden gun goes after Amir shoots himself on the roof, but at some point it ends up in the hand of Greg Nightmare. So how did that happen? I don't know. Seems like quite a coincidence, too, that the Killer 7 end up fighting Greg Nightmare, so Garcine can get the golden gun back. He's also known as the Bloody Heartland, which is a great nickname that just screams of Japanese to English translation. The Bloody Heartland. His birth name and identity is Amir Parkreiner, which we now know, of course. The person who Holbert was investigating in Colburn Elementary School was indeed Garcia Smith, using his real name, Amir Parkreiner, long before he became part of the Killer7 and long before he became Garcia Smith. But now we move on to Dan Smith, tyrant who put on suit. Dan Smith, I should say, and his screen is a lot brighter. His pages are a lot brighter than Garcian's, and a lot plainer. It's like there's nothing on it. It's like Dan is just standing off to the side. I guess it shows that, you know, Dan's not flashy. He's not ostentatious. He just has blank pages. The text on the bottom of the page, apparently it says that Dan Smith was born in Detroit, Michigan, of Irish descent. He is 33 years old. So he's the same age as Garcian. He is a tyrant, the true Hellion. His weapons are a revolver and the dreaded demon gun, which of course we have used both over the course of the game. It looks like he's holding his normal revolver, I think, there. That doesn't look like the demon gun. It's too small. He is best at eliminating the duplicator smiles with his collateral shot. Yeah, he is good at that, but then as we found out in the school, Masked Smith is quite good at it. Once he learns his 5 vial attack, he is able to kill duplicator smiles in one hit because the children know who is the strongest. And it is, of course, Masked Smith, though Dan is fearsome. Dan is a former agent of the Seattle Self-Defense Department. I think we'll learn a little bit more about that. That's mentioned in Encounter when we talk about Curtis Blackburn and Pedro Montana. They refer to the Seattle Self-Defense Department, but don't really say anything about what it is or what it's about. I think as we go through the factions section and the timeline, I think we'll learn I don't know if we learn much, but I think we learn a little bit about what that actually is. But it is a group that Dan used to be in, and kind of everyone in it turned to crime, like horrific crime, like orphan trading, so it doesn't sound like it was a very good organization, I'm just gonna say. He and Mills have known each other for a long time, so Dan and Mills, we never see them interact in the game, but apparently the two of them do know each other, even though the only one that Mills actually talks to is Garcian. I don't really know to what extent can the other personalities interact with people in the outside world. I mean, we see Master Smith do it with Jean de Paul, but for the most part, we don't see these characters talking a whole lot to people, just outside characters. Dan does talk to Trevor Pearl Harbor, it's true, but still the idea of Dan and Mills talking seems like such an odd thing, since the only character we see him interacting with is Garcian. Curtis Blackburn was his mentor and his mortal enemy. Yeah, we know about that. And something else that we find out, his room in the Union Hotel was number 601. So Curtis Blackburn, his mentor, his mortal enemy. Something else that I was thinking of that we find out is that Curtis kills Dan. That is something that Garcian mentions, and Curtis himself does mention it to Dan, that he killed him. However, we also saw that Garcian, or rather I should say Amir, killed Dan in the Union Hotel. So Dan has died more than once, I guess. He died from being killed by Curtis. He died from being killed by Amir, and he died by being blowed up by a Heaven Smile at the end in the school. So he's died 3 times. I think the Curtis death was the first one. And again, I think the timeline will specify that. But I think Curtis Blackburn was the first one to kill him, and that, I guess, was the real death, because that after that he would have been resurrected, I guess. So does that count as still being alive if you're like a personae working as part of Harmon Smith? I don't know. But yeah, he's died 3 times now. And here's Coyote Smith. She walks in rain of blood. A flashier two-page spread than Dan had. And we know about Coyote's blood. The wrists either shooting out blood or absorbing blood. She has blood on her skirt. We know where it came from now. It's memories of the bullet holes that Amir put in her. What does her text have to say? It says that Coyote Smith was born in Portland, Oregon. Of Japanese origin, she is 20 years old. So she is Japanese, but she was born in the U.S. Her nickname is Barefoot, which is obvious. We know that, and we can see why right there on the page. She cuts her wrist to send out her bloody shower, and we know about that, yes. She cuts her wrist to spew out blood in order to knock down walls. We know that. It's obvious that that is what you do with that. Mizaru serves her, yes, and the we don't ever actually find out more about that. Mizaru's role in things and how she came to serve Coyote. We don't actually know any details about that. Her weapon is an automatic pistol with a scope attached. She reloads slowly. Yes, she does, and that does come back to bite her in the fight with the handsome men, in that she reloads so slowly that she gets shot because of that. By handsome light brown, I believe it was. She is a formidable fighter with kicks, and yes, if you use her counterattack and her down attack, then yes, you will see her kicks. If you never use that, though, then you will never see her actually doing any kicks. So that line might confuse you, but she is good with the kicks. Her brother is a member of the Liberal Party. Well, we never heard anything about her brother. We don't know who her brother is. The Liberal Party was the Japanese opposition party that we found out about in Sunset, but we didn't find out about her brother. But it turns out that she was killed by her own brother, who was ordered to by Matsuken, Kenjiro Matsuoka. So, again, no additional information about that Coyote was killed by her own brother, and then Coyote was killed by Amir, and then Coyote was killed by Heaven Smiles in the school, so she is someone else who has died 3 times. I guess all the Killer7 would probably have died 3 times, at least, but her original death, I guess, was by her own brother. Her body was recovered by Garson, who would have then resurrected her, I guess, as part of the Killer7. Her room in the Union Hotel was 404. Well, no, her body after being killed by her brother would not have been resurrected by Garcian, because as we saw in the hotel, she was part of the Smiths before Garcian was. So let's ignore that. Let's move on to the next one, which is Masked Smith. The pro wrestler is really strong. You know, as far as taglines go, I think Mask got kind of the short end of the stick on this one. I think everyone before this one had a much better tagline. The pro wrestler is really strong is really not much of one. I'm sorry to say, Mask. I mean, we do know that children are pure. They know who's the strongest. It still is a good line. It's on the right side of the screen. But the pro wrestler is really strong does not seem like a good enough tagline for someone the caliber of Masked Smith. What does his info say? It says that he was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The masked man is 38 years old. And at 38, that would make him the oldest member of the Killer7. In Masked Smith, Luchador meets Lancashire, Mexican wrestling with Anglo-Irish tactics. I'm not sure what about his tactics are Anglo-Irish. We see him do like some suplexes. We see him do a headbutt. So I'm not really sure what's being referred to there. He is very strong, even without weapons, using his German suplex and headbutt moves. Yeah, I mean, he is the strongest. We know this. And even when he, when he gains his ultimate form at the end, he can shoot his magic missiles without his grenade launchers. His weapons are 2 grenade launchers that fire normal shells, shock shells, and focus shells. Yeah, we know about these. He is the most destructive member of the Killer7. We know that. Like, Iwasaru told us that this mask is whack. He will destroy Kingdom Come and then some. And of course, if there is a crack in the wall, we know whose show it is. Can only be one man's show, and that is Masked Smith. The pro wrestler is really strong. His room in the Union Hotel was 306, where he was shot in the shower after taking his mask off. Next up is Sound Hunter Speed Star Con Smith. It's a very dramatic-looking two-page spread here, fitting with the fastest member of the Killer7. What does this text have to say? It says that of Chinese descent, Con Smith is blind at 14 years old. So Con's Chinese. That never comes up in the game itself. It's only mentioned here what his nationality is. It also mentioned his age, 14, so of course he is the youngest, and that he is indeed blind, and that he operates entirely by hearing, I guess. He is known for his supersonic footwork. It's true. Like he says, it is dangerous. He runs very fast. Hopefully he doesn't, trip or anything, because that would hurt. It would hurt a lot to trip when he's running so fast. He has perfect hypersensitive hearing, which is how he's able to get around, and also why he is able to hear the sounds of cracks in the walls, or he is able to hear the direction of music that is being played because of his hypersensitive hearing. His weapons are 2 automatic pistols, which, yes, we know all about that. He is a big fan of the handsome men. It's true. Unfortunately, the handsome men are not big fans of him. And I'm sure he was crushed that we had to kill the handsome men. He is very attached to Coyote Smith, and he hates Dan Smith. So that's interesting. We never really hear too much about the relationships that the Killer7 have with each other, We never really hear anything about how they feel about each other. But it does mention that Con Smith is good friends with Coyote, and he hates Dan. Again, it makes me wonder, is there any period of time when these personae are separate from each other? I mean, they were separate from each other in the Handsome Men chapter. That was the only time we saw that. And then there was in the hotel. I mean, I guess they would have been personae at that point in the hotel, because they all had died before then, like Dan being killed by Curtis, and they were the Smith Syndicate at that point in time. So I guess they were separate at that point, but still, considering that we never actually see them separate when we're playing the game, the idea that, Con likes Coyote but hates Dan, you kind of wonder where these people are interacting. How do they interact with each other? Do they just talk through the TV at each other? I don't know. He whistles when he is in a good mood. I don't remember if we ever heard that. I don't think we ever heard him whistling. His room in the Union Hotel was number 203. Next, it's time for Coyote Smith, villain of Hellion. And I think that the villain of Hellion phrase refers to how he is Dan Smith's enemy. Dan and Coyote don't like each other. So I assume that's what that's referring to. Let's have a look at what Coyote's facts are. He's Puerto Rican and 28 years old. He is known as the Thief and is extremely athletic. Of course, we know this, that he can jump like no other to get on roofs and such. He has the power known as deadly jumping for use in burglary and other things as well. I mean, he's being able to jump that high. It's a very useful skill. It's not only having to do with stealing things. You could use it for so many things. Like, say, if you were repairing a house, you needed to get onto the roof. All you need to do is shoot a couple people to get some thin blood, and then, then you were able to jump up onto the roof and fix the roof. Just, hopefully no one asks about those people that you shot. His weapon is a modified revolver. I don't know in what way it's modified, really. It doesn't really say. In the comic and in the manual, it's much bigger than it looks in the game, so it's obviously modified in those cases. In this case, however, it just kind of looks like a normal revolver, though I guess he just kind of open it up to reload it in an unusual way. Maybe it helps him reload it faster. I don't know. He loves to unlock heavy padlocks. It's his thing. We all have our own particular thing. For Coyote, it's heavy padlocks. He's into that. In the past, he was killed by Dan Smith, so I guess his original death was Dan. Then he was killed by Amir. Then he was killed by the Dark Heaven Smiles. So that would explain maybe why Coyote does not like Dan Smith. Hey, you kind of killed me there, and, It's easy for a guy to hold a grudge over something like that. I don't know if we learn any more information about the circumstances of how Dan killed Coyote. I don't think we do. His room in the Union Hotel was number 502. And he speaks in the dialect from Hiroshima. Coyote speaks in Japanese, I guess. I don't know why, because he's Puerto Rican, and everyone else seems to speak English. But apparently he can speak Japanese, but it's in the dialect from Hiroshima. And the last member of the Killer7, Kevin Smith, he kills taciturnly. You know, again, like with Mask, I'm going to say that Kevin got the short end of the tagline there. It doesn't sound so cool as some of the other people got. I do like his 2-page spread, though. He might have my favorite. Like with, I guess there's supposed to be TV screens with like a neat little background going on there. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but I think it's probably my favorite of these 2-page spreads. Kevin was born in England and is 30 years old. We never hear him talk, so I don't know if he has an accent. Apparently, in the beta version, apparently he was supposed to talk, but I think his lines just weren't used for whatever reason. They decided to make him silent. He wears sunglasses. He sure does. His weapons are a large knife and smaller throwing knives, and it is worthwhile to mention that he has infinite smaller throwing knives. He just pulls them out from anywhere. Who knows where he gets them from, but he doesn't run out. When he turns invisible, he can bypass security systems easily, and there never is any kind of explanation as for why he can turn invisible. He just can? I mean, it's not the weirdest thing in this game, but some of the things that are weird do have some kind of explanation. This does not. He is taciturn. As mentioned on the page, he kills taciturnly. We already know that. He hates heights and loves dark places. There's really nothing in the game that would corroborate the whole thing about him hating heights. He doesn't seem to have a problem with it when we're playing the game. As far as dark places, I guess that explains why he's always wearing sunglasses. His eyesight is weak, so I guess those are prescription sunglasses then. His shoulders are sloped, and sometimes he has bad posture. Sometimes he has the worst posture, and it's all the time. It actually kind of makes my back hurt a little when I'm watching Kevin Smith. When I'm playing as him, I kind of just wish he would stand up straight. It does bother me a little bit that he's always bent over all the time. It can't be comfortable. That has to hurt. I don't know why he's standing like that. In the dark, his eyes are supposed to shine. However, this has not been confirmed. No, we never actually see it for ourselves in the game. And his place in the Union Hotel is in the lobby. It's true that when he was shot, he was working the front desk for whatever reason. We don't know why the Killer7 were there in the hotel, but they each had individual rooms, and Kevin, I guess, got the short end of the stick on that, and that he was working the lobby instead of getting his own room. And now, he was the last member of the Killer7, but there's still a couple more characters to look at, like Samantha Smith. Obedient, semen, and cruelty. I'm sorry, it's Samantha Sitbun, not Samantha Smith. She does get the name Samantha Smith at one point, but her real name is Samantha Sitbun. And yes, she is described as obedient, semen, and cruelty. I'm just gonna say maybe that made more sense in Japanese. I'm gonna guess. What's her facts like? Well, Samantha Sitbun is a college student. She cares for Harmon for 3 days out of the week for scholarship aid. So that brings up a weird point in that Samantha, while she is, well, we're not going to say caring for Harmon, while Samantha is abusing Harmon, she also appears to be one of the personae and accompanies Harmon in Mission 1, Angel. She does appear there. So she's able to leave the room, as we see in the beginning of Chapter 2, Sunset. She's able to leave the room, like, Garcian pays her, and she leaves Harmon's room. So apparently she only comes around 3 days out of the week. So she is also a persona, but she's also able to leave the room and live her own life. I don't know how that works. I don't have those answers. But apparently she is able to leave, and she is able to just go off and do her own thing and not actually be connected to Harmon Smith. In reality, she molests Harmon. Yeah, we saw that. We saw a lot of that. She was doing a whole lot of molesting. Sometimes she teases Harmon. She does that too. She is mentally deranged, and I think we got that idea. I think that was made pretty clear throughout the game. When Harmon is awake, she changes completely into a loyal servant. She appears in the Pigeon's letters. She did appear in the last one. At the end, she obtains the name Samantha Smith. So this is not quite right. At the end, well, she does not gain the name Samantha Smith at the end. The timeline will actually talk more about that. It'll talk more about why she was referred to as Samantha Smith in that last letter from Johnny Gagnon, and when exactly that happened and why. But no, in the present day that the game takes place in, she is not Samantha Smith. She is Samantha Sitbon, working as a part-time caretaker of Harmon, just smacking him around and having sex with him while he's unconscious. That's her part-time job. I don't know what your part-time job in college was like. Mine was not like that. Hers is, though. And now let's move on to Christopher Mills. What's sad is that we've gotten used to this. What's sad is that we've gotten used to this. We've gotten used to this. I mean, our senses. That's pathetic. But as Garcian, or rather Amir, says, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not still human. Born in Seattle, Christopher Mills is 49 years old and of Scotch descent. He is the Killer7's informant. He is the connection between the U.S. government and Killer7. Well, this is all information that we already know. He is the U.S. government's dog. It does seem to be the case. However, when we talk to his ghost, he does mention that he was doing some digging into the government. He was exposing the secrets, which is why he was killed. So maybe in the end, he wasn't going to be the dog after all. But we can't say what he would have done, because he died before he could have done any of it. He was Curtis Blackburn's informant when he was a boy, so I guess that's where Dan and Mills know each other from. When Dan was working for Curtis, Mills was also working for Curtis at some point. He and Dan Smith are old acquaintances, but their relationship is very bad. That might explain why we never actually see Mills and Dan talk to each other, because the two of them just don't get along, and Garcin and Mills maybe get along a lot better. We don't know why Mills and Dan don't get along, but I mean, maybe this is why Dan is not the one who actually speaks to Mills to get the missions. Mills is also an assassin, but his skills are terrible. So I guess Mills has carried out some hits before himself, but maybe it's not a good idea for him to do so, because apparently he's not very good at it. But I guess he can do it if he has to. And he is in possession of the car, covered in Olmeida's blood. Yeah, so we saw that. In Smile, Garcian and Mills were sitting in a car, and we had not seen Mills driving that car before. It actually was the car that Clemens had gotten that was covered with Olmeida's blood. I guess he bought it from him. I guess Mills wanted a new ride and really liked that car. So he bought the car, did not wash the blood off, because, hey, you have Andre Olmeida's blood on your car. You don't wash that off. It makes the car special. But he had the car, and then in the final chapter, Lion, we see that Amir now has the car. He drives it to Battleship Island, so it's good to see that that car is getting some use. And so now, these are all of the characters that get their own pages in the characters section of Hand of Killer7. The Killer7 themselves, along with Harmon and Kunlan, get 2-page spreads. Samantha and Mills get 1 page. And next time, we're going to be going on to the other characters, but the other characters do not get their own entire pages. They are bunched together, multiple characters onto a page. So we're going to be looking at that, looking at characters like Travis and Iwazaru, and also looking at characters that appeared in individual chapters like Andre Almeida or Greg Nightmare, which is a great name. I just want to say it again. Greg Nightmare is a great name. So we're going to be looking at that next time, because looking at only these few characters, I didn't realize it would take as long as it did. So I am going to get some water to clear my throat, and next time round, we are going to be taking a look at the next half of the characters section of Killer 7 and see what we can learn from that. I'll see you then.